Hi, I'm Mike Papantonio, and this is America's Lawyer. The White House is once again protecting the Saudi crown prince by basically saying he's allowed to kill whoever he wants, and we're going to give you immunity. That's really a story. A careless reporter? Well, they almost started World War III by getting basic facts wrong about the ongoing Russian-Ukraine conflict. And victims of Jeffrey Epstein are now suing the big banks that allowed him to use his money to traffic women. All that and more, it's coming up, so don't go anywhere. America's Lawyer starts right now. The Biden administration came out recently, said that the Saudi crown prince is immune from being prosecuted for murdering journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Ring of Fire's Farron Cousin joins me now to talk about that and other issues. Farron, you know, we almost called this right. I can't even count the stories we've done on this mutt of a dictator. But, you know, the problem I'm having with this is when Biden was running, we've got to do something about these predators. I forgot what he called them. It was pretty ugly language.
He said, let's make them pariahs on the world stage.
Okay. So they've gone from pariahs now to where we're giving them immunity. We're giving the Saudi prince immunity. The problem I got with this is, A, Saudi prince is not entitled to immunity. So they had to mix it up and they had to change the politics and make him prime minister. Pick it up from there. Yeah. This is a troubling story.
It's a truly disgusting story because, as you said, as the crown prince, he's not immune from anything. Only a head of state would be immune, which I still think is a very stupid policy. But either way, the royal family said, okay, we know you're going to be prosecuted. We know that they've already determined you authorized this killing. You were behind it. So we're just going to make you prime minister. Usually that's only reserved for the king of Saudi Arabia, but they went ahead, passed it on to the son here so that he could not be prosecuted. Again, under this very stupid policy where we say that, oh, you can kill whoever you want, but if you have this title, there's nothing we can legally do about it. That's absurd.
Okay, here I want to come back and say what I've said so many times. We talk about the Biden administration, but truthfully, he has advisors around him. He has people that are saying, yeah, that's a good idea. Let's give this dictator who has mowed down more folks than we can count for simply pledging that they need to end this ugly little bit of politics called crown politics. Disappeared, lost their heads. We've known that whole history. Biden knows that. And instinctively, Biden came out and he said, we're not going to let that happen. But then politics takes over. His advisors say this is a good idea. It's a terrible idea. And, you know, the truth is, as this story goes forward, it seems to be getting worse and worse because people keep digging and digging into how this came about.
Well, and it's truly disturbing as well because Biden went to Saudi Arabia, as we talked about many weeks ago, over the summer, begged them, please, OPEC, do something about gas prices. And they basically laughed in his face. They said, we're not going to do anything at all. We're going to cut production, actually. And so when we need a favor from them, they are not there to help us one bit. But everything they need, whether it's weapons, whether it's military support and training, we bend over backwards to give it to this government of Saudi Arabia, and it's to our own detriment. We get nothing in return, and they are abusing this relationship.
Yeah, it's like a cash cow for the weapons industry, okay? Yeah. Everybody, oil. No, it's not oil. It's weapons.
It is.
Boeing, Raytheon, all of them are making a ton of money selling to this punk who by all right, what they call him the wild bear or something, which is a huge insult to him. He gets really mad when you call him the wild bear. Well, that means something over him. It means that he's out of control. And truthfully, I know that Biden didn't call the Justice Department and say, hey, let's really work to give this guy an unlimited license to kill, but that's what they've done.
Yep.
A reporter with the Associated Press nearly plunged us into World War III by getting some basic facts of a story completely wrong. Wow, 3 weeks ago, we did a story, and we talked about how so many experts that really do understand how the nuclear process works are saying we're edging more and more towards a nuclear disaster because of crazy steps that government's taken and the media's taken. This story's right on point, isn't it?
It is. You had this Associated Press reporter who immediately came out following an incident and said, oh my God, Russian missiles have been fired at Poland. They hit in Poland, they killed people. Russia is now attacking a sovereign NATO country. And the NATO country part of that is obviously the big deal, because if you attack a NATO partner, the rest of NATO is going to come at you. And he immediately reported that story. He said it was based on intelligence. I can't name the person.
Yeah, anonymous
somebody
intelligence.
told me who's in the intelligence community this was Russia. And the entire media at that point was gearing up for World War III. That was all the headlines. That was all that was going on social media. We were on the cusp. We truly were.
Okay, first of all, let me back up and break this down a little bit. Poland, the folks in charge of Poland said, no, it wasn't Russia. Right. There's a lot of bad stuff the Russians have done. I mean, you want to talk about some really, really bad stuff, there's plenty to talk about. But not to the point to where some little freak says, I have to be the first to get the story. Yep. I was a journalism major back at University of Florida, and back then it used to be important that you could verify a story, that there was no race to get the first printout when it's something as serious as potential world war. And, when we did that segment last time, I remember, I don't know who these commenters are that came in on to comment on the segment, but it's an overstatement of the risk. You don't worry about nuclear nonsense. This is how it happens. And so this cat, they fire him, but you know what? It ought to wash up his career, to tell you the truth. The severity of what happened here was so serious that they not only fired him, but I think he's going to have a tough time getting a job. Due diligence, isn't that still important?
It really is, but you nailed it on the head. That's how the media works these days. It doesn't matter how accurate your story is. What matters is how quickly you get it out there. You'll issue the retractions and the corrections later on, but you have to be the first to put it out there, because the media is no longer about spreading information. It's a business.
It's a race.
It's about making money.
And war is a big money maker.
It is.
We talk about, if you take a look at MSNBC right now, or Fox, or CNN, God bless CNN if they're around for another year. But the point is, if you take a look at who they're pushing retired generals. This is retired General Jones. Well, they don't tell the backstory. Retired General Jones is working for friggin' Raytheon right now, okay? Smith is working for Boeing. They have a direct interest in going on the air and scaring the hell out of everybody about what's happening in the Ukraine. Well, they should go on the air and they should talk about the balance, the slim balance that's taking place right there. You could be involved in a nuclear conflict that quick. Putin is a crazy man. He is a lunatic. And this story, to me, going forward, these folks need to be really, really careful. This is corporate media mentality. How do we get advertisers? Well, we create a big story. Nuclear war is a pretty damn big story that they're about to create if they're not careful.
And it's very disturbing, too, to see this from the Associated Press.
Oh, I know.
I mean, you could understand if it's one of the corporate media outlet or cable news outlets doing this. Yeah. Associated Press, you're held to the highest of the high standards.
Right.
And when y'all get something so badly wrong that
well, it bleeds everywhere, doesn't it?
It does.
This story was around for 3 days before anybody knew it was nonsense.
Yeah.
Maybe 4 days.
I don't think most people understand that those missiles actually came from Ukraine.
Yeah.
It was an accident.
Of course.
But that's where the missiles came from.
But the easy story is to sell the jazz, right? And the jazz is Russians do it again. They want to start a nuclear war. They're bombing Poland. Jesus Christ. Several victims of Jeffrey Epstein are suing big banks for allowing Epstein to use his money for human trafficking and abuse. I love this story. Because finally, these brilliant young lawyers, who are my friends, by the way, we followed these guys from the very beginning of this story. They're the ones that identified what was going on with Epstein. The fact that the government was giving him a free pass to involve raping children. That's the headline there. He was raping children. So here, what these guys have done is they've said, we're going to step it up a little bit. We're going to say the banks were involved because they enabled him. Talk about it just a little bit.
Yeah, what happened was Jeffrey Epstein had basically triggered all of the red flags that banks have in place to identify things like human trafficking or money laundering. He triggered all of these red flags. But instead of doing anything about it, what he did was he brought him on down to his little Epstein Island, down to South Florida, and said, listen, I know there's some issues here. go meet with this young girl. She's going to give you a massage and whatever else you wanted. And that's the story the young women are telling right now. Of course, they're doing it anonymously. They're very afraid of what could happen to them. But they're implicating some of these big executives at these banks, some of the big wigs, and they said clearly in this lawsuit, Epstein brought them down to keep himself untouchable, to make these deals.
Well, okay, so let me talk about the deal. The deal is you bring somebody from a big bank, right? And you say, I have billionaire friends, and I can get you their accounts, or I can make their accounts disappear if I want to. It's the influence of that. So people like, was J.P. Morgan? His big one was J.P. Morgan. J.P. Morgan said, hell yeah, we don't care what you're doing. This is Farron. This is after the guy had already been caught raping girls in South Florida, kids, when they tell him, well, you know what your punishment is? You got to show up in a cell, a jail cell, from 6 o'clock in the morning. What are the times?
Well, it was 6 p.m.
6
to
p.m.
6
to 6 in the morning. Right.
Yeah.
So you have to show up, and that's your punishment. And oh, by the way, carry on your life as much as you want.
You just leave during the
day. You
day.
can leave during the day. And we found out it was a corrupt judge. It was corrupt prosecutors. It was corrupt federal prosecutors. It was corrupt state prosecutors. And you know what? Nobody paid any attention to it. Nobody went to jail over that. You see?
Yeah.
And so then we find out, well, no, this is a lot more serious than that. But the banking part of it, these guys, like I've always said, there's some money that's too damn expensive, not for these guys. These guys were willing to push it to the limit so they could get another account, right?
Well, it's like we've talked about with these banks in the past and other banks. They'll launder money for terrorists. They'll launder money for human traffickers. They will do whatever it takes to put more money in their pockets.
Yeah.
They don't care about the red flag laws they have in place. Those are only basically customary. Depends on who it is. If you're a low-level, nobody, they'll pop you for it. If you're a Jeffrey Epstein, you'll get invited down to the island.
DOJ has done nothing meaningful in this case.
Right.
They have a list of who they could go after. They know all the facts. They've done nothing. They're still covering up. Wall Street, I call it the Caligula mentality. There's nothing so awful that they won't be involved with for the right amount of money. And that's what happened here. CNN recently announced another round of layoffs as the cable news company continues to lose viewers by the tons. Do they make it, okay, let's put it in perspective. When we're talking about them losing, all they're really saying is, gee whiz, we made $1 billion less than we did the year before. And so because of that, they've now put Licht in charge of it, who has he has absolutely zero experience with trying to take a company that's failed and put it on its feet again. Only thing Licht does, by the way, he used to be one of the producers for my ex-law partner, Joe Scarborough. Did you know that?
No, I did not.
Yeah. So that's his experience. But now what he's done is he said, I'm going to come in and I'm going to save this company. I don't know if it's savable at this point.
No, and they have no idea what they really want to do with it either. They say, oh, well, we're going to move more to the center, but they don't even know what the center is. Then they say, well, maybe we'll move a little bit to the right. Maybe we'll just move to actual investigative journalism, which that would be great. If you actually want to be the network of investigative journalism.
Do news again.
Yeah.
Do news again. How about
people
that?
On the ground in the conflict areas like we used to see in the 60s. I know it's dangerous, but that is news. That is reporting. People in the field.
Okay, Zucker came in and he said, we're going to make it. It's called quick profits, bad planning. Okay, it was quick profits, bad planning. Quick profits were everybody hates Trump. Okay, that's a headline. Yeah, we know everybody hates Trump, but you don't need Brian Steller and Jake Tapper and the same folks every day saying we hate Donald Trump. The world hates Donald Trump, but give us some damn news. Give us a reason to tune in. I don't want to hear what's on top of that little freak Stellar's head every day. I want to report the news.
Well, and part of the problem too is they would just talk about it, make fun of him, talk about, oh, this is just so bad that he says these things. Right, because you can address those things, because I do it every day, but you can tie it into bigger issues. And if you can do that and make it a real story, then it could be worthwhile. Of course, you don't want to oversaturate it. But I think Jay Rosen, professor of journalism, NYU.
Yeah.
We've actually had him on Ring
Yeah,
of
we
Fire in the
have.
past.
Yeah.
He had the best point when he said CNN was enjoying this sugar high
Yes.
on Donald Trump.
That's exactly right.
And then, you're suddenly out of candy, and then you come crashing down.
Okay, Zucker has destroyed this network.
Yeah.
And now he's moved on. God knows, I don't know where he is right now, but the business, the media business doesn't really care. He was a big name. We're going to move him to some new position. He'll find a new position. But the big question for CNN is, how do you take a news agency and report the news again when the public is so tribal? They're so damn polarized that if we even suggest, as far to the left as you and I are, if we suggest there's a story that maybe the Democrats did something wrong, there's pandemonium among our followers. But the point is, how do you ever get to the point where it's almost it's so polarized that you can't tell a story that this part of the public believes is offensive.
Well, and the problem is the media created that problem. The media polarized itself and then polarized the country. And now that the media is realizing, we can't sustain ourselves on this anymore, they can't go back to normal because of the problem they created. CNN with Crossfire back in the early 2000s.
That was okay in a little bit, but now it's 24/7.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So they helped push us to that before Fox News was doing it, way before MSNBC was doing it, and now they're stuck.
Murdoch came in with the formula. Okay, he was doing it in Australia. He comes to the U.S. and say, hey, let me do Fox News. And then, although it worked, I don't know how it works for Fox News, it obviously doesn't work for liberal media. And I don't know why nobody seems to get that. It kind of reminds me of the Air America days, when it was me and Rachel Maddow and Chuck D and got a great lineup of people doing those shows. We knew we couldn't make it because it had to do with the liberal formula that's a problem for the media right now.
Yeah.
Colleges have found a new way to make a quick buck, but getting students addicted to gambling on sports events may not be the way to do it. I don't know how to take this story, man. I kind of, it sounded a little preachy, to tell you the truth, when I read it. Hell, a kid's 18 years old. So what if he has a chance to gamble? Now, I get it. Gambling can be very addictive. There's no question about that. And the statistics show that it's most addictive between 18 and 35 or somewhere like that. But I mean, look, they're coming in, they're paying these colleges, millions of dollars just to say, hey, we want little Johnny to be able to gamble if he wants. If the parents say, no, we don't like that, send him to another damn college,
Well, the big issue here is that you have these college boards, right? The people running the college sending out mass emails to all the students saying, hey, here's a great offer from our newest sponsor, which colleges shouldn't have sponsors to begin with. But they say, listen, you go place a $20 bet on this new Caesar sports book, they're gonna give you an extra $100. So they're enticing these students to go and make money for their new investor.
Wake up call. They already have bookies. Okay, the bookies are already working college campuses. This is not like it's revolutionary.
But to me, what gets me about this is, listen, we understand you're going to have these groups that come in and sponsor college sports. Obviously, Gatorade and other sports drinks will do it. You have your Pepsi and your Cokes that do it. And Under Armour, all of those. Okay, I get that. That's fine. The problem is when schools are bringing in $8 million a year from a Caesars contract, why is this not translating into lower tuitions? If you're bringing in the money from somewhere else, you don't have to gouge these poor students taking out hundreds of thousands of dollars in loans to go to your school.
Same way with the football team. Same way with the entire sports. Good point. As I was reading this, I really didn't think about that. I thought it was funny. We're talking about LSU and a couple of other colleges say, this is great, man. We're making a lot of money doing this.
And that's the problem, is they've turned colleges into businesses.
Yeah.
And that's why we're seeing the skyrocketing tuitions. That's why we have the student loan debt crisis. It's because these colleges have become money hungry. And a lot of this is because they lost a lot of money during the pandemic. You couldn't have everybody come to your football games, your basketball games. Well, how do we get it back? Well, Caesar stepped in and said, hey, I've got an idea. Let's get them addicted to gambling.
We're here to help you. All right, medical debt is trapping families in poverty, and big banks, they're cashing in on it. How many big bank stories do we have to do to where somebody says, Jesus, we need to really rethink of how we're treating Wall Street. You know, when I got to tell you, in the maybe 60s or the 70s, banks weren't, you know, it wasn't that, was Gecko, what was the movie that was made, Greed is Good, you know.
Wall Street.
Wall Street, yeah. Okay. Before Wall Street, you had mom and pop banks, okay? And then just like everything else, you had predators come in and buy all the mom and pop banks and come up with organizations like Wells Fargo and you name it, Chase Manhattan. And so now we're at a point to where I don't think there's a way to turn around here, man. This is an ugly story. Why don't you give us a story?
Yeah, excuse me. Basically, what's happening here is obviously medical debt is a massive problem here in the United States. Skyrocketing healthcare costs, skyrocketing prescription drugs, surgery costs, whatever it is, and people can't pay it. So the big banks thought, wait a minute, here's people in debt. How do we capitalize on this? Well, we partner with the hospitals. Mm-hmm. So when you're recovering from your surgery, the hospital comes up to you with a document and says, hey, this is going to set you back about $80,000, but don't worry. Sign this little piece of paper right here. We're partnered with this Allied Bank over here, whatever it is.
Yeah.
You sign this, they're going to give you the loan and pay it off, and you don't have to worry. I know you just got a new heart a few hours ago, and we want to make it as hassle-free for you as possible. So they take out these massive loans that do, for the most part, at first, have a lower interest rate than a credit card.
And then every year it turns
just balloons and balloons and balloons, and they're screwing these patients over.
Who are the people behind this? Is it coming directly? Is it a new Wall Street grab, or is it just kind of just here and there?
It's both Wall Street, because you got a lot of hedge funds in it, and just the simple greed of the hospital industry.
Yeah.
And I think people overlook the hospital industry.
Yeah.
We don't have, you've talked about,
We don't
have mom and pop banks.
No.
We don't have mom and pop medical centers anymore.
Doctor-owned hospitals are a thing of the past.
Yeah.
They came in and consolidated all that. This is how it lands right here.
Yep, and it's all about the money. It's not about the care. Yeah. And the banks said, there's a lot of money in this. Let's go get our cut.
Okay. The secrets of a brutal Florida school for boys are finally being exposed. It's an ugly story that's decades old about death and abuse that occurred at Dozier School. It's hard to get your arms around this because it really started happening in the 1900s, where we knew, early reports, we already knew that these kids that were being sent to reform school for things like smoking, for running away from homes that were awful, to try to get away and have a life on their own. The things they were sending them to reform school, it wasn't crimes. There were some crimes, but it wasn't the kind of thing you would think about. So Dozier rises up out of that. Pick it up.
Yeah, you have this school in this small little town in Florida. It's a drive-through town. Nobody pays attention to it. Marianna, right outside the capital. And starting in 1900, I think, late 1800s possibly, Dozier School pops up. Mm-hmm. And they say, well, send us your troubled boys. We got a lot of troubled boys around these parts, all through the state. Send them here. We're going to take care of them. We're going to put them on the right path. Well, the right path led to a little building on that property that they called the White House. It was painted all white. And in that room is where torture, no other way to describe it other than torture, took place. They would drag these boys out of their, dorm rooms, sometimes in the middle of the night, take them over to the White House and beat them mercilessly. Mm-hmm. Those are the stories that the people who were there have told, and sometimes worse than just beatings.
Well, this quote, there's been some great reporting on this, but there hasn't been enough.
No,
I call this, the shelf life on this should be endless, because it's not just Marianna, Florida, where this is taking place. This is from one of the people that I actually interviewed. The man just went through absolute hell. He said, the first blow lifted me 1.5 feet off the bed. And every time and every strap would come down, you'd hear the shuffle on the concrete because their shoes would slide as they put as much force as they can behind it. And you could hear the swoosh, swoosh, bam, bam. The same person reported that he saw one of the kids there that was beaten to death, put in a tub after he was beaten to death. And then where the story gets really, really bizarre is they would call the parents and say, your child got sick. And we had to bury him because he died. And so the point is they could only find places where they buried 31 kids. That they know that there's far more buried all over that grounds, and there's no records to even show it. because they understood if we can get away with this, we can do it quietly, nobody's going to know about it. These were kids, they were farming out to the community. Farmers would hire them for nothing. They'd go out and work all day long, come back and
Dozier School would get the money for basically having this forced labor. They'd come back and they'd get the hell beaten out of them for any minor, real or not, infraction. And what really is concerning here is we still don't know how many bodies are buried. They're having to use this specialized equipment, sending the sound waves through the ground to find anything that may look like a body underground. It's horrifying what they're having to do. And here's what's even more disgusting. A couple years ago, I think a little over 10 years ago, when Charlie Crist was our governor, they finally looked into the Dozier School. It had been going on for 100 years. And Chris looks at it and his government says, you know what? There's nothing we can do. Yeah, we're just going to let it be. It said the state report found no evidence indicating a staff member was responsible for any student deaths.
Yeah, you know what? That was the FDLE report. Charlie paid for it. I went to law school with Charlie. He's a capable lawyer. He could have read the report the same way I did. It was a useless report. All you had to do is read between the lines. The interviews that were some of the boys said, this is what happened. They were cut out. There was no questions, why did you cut that out? Why did you cut out the fact that the story after story where they say we're pulled into the White House, they bind our feet, we're raped, we're beaten, and we're buried. Now, how do you have all of these stories out there that I know they told, because we've talked to them. They told these stories to the FDLE. Charlie looks at it and says, well, what the hell? I mean, I don't see anything here. It was just an absolute cop-out, wasn't it?
It really was. And so what we have right here is these failures across the board. Past government, current government, the law enforcement officials, the law enforcement oversight, they all knew this was happening. They did nothing about it because even though, this ended, a couple decades ago, they don't want to get into it now because then it opens up this new can of worms. We got to investigate the current law enforcement. Maybe this is going to make other states look into what's happening today.
Here's the good news. The good news. The good news is that we've talked to some of the legislators who knew nothing about it. They weren't the idiots that came up with the idea, hey, let's put a plaque. The plaque is about this big, and it's on the wall, it's on the outside wall of the White House, where all this beating and rape and horrible things took place. And it says, we're sorry. We're really sorry. And the thing to me that is the most agonizing is how the community let this happen. We're talking about Marianna, Florida. I mean, there's one red light there. And to say we didn't know what was going on is just reprehensible to me. It reminds me, I don't know if you've ever traveled, you go to a place like Auschwitz or Dachau, and Dachau's in this little village, and in the middle of the village are these big smokestacks, and where people are being murdered and burned alive sometimes. And the community says, oh, we didn't know anything about that. It's just, I don't know whether it's some type of peculiar social event that takes place where it's just absolutely, people are willing to put their head in the sand and ignore it. But that happened here. The rest of this story is that this is going on in other places of the country. If you take a look at what's going on in Louisiana, I took a look at the New York Times story on what's happening in Louisiana, very, very well done story, talking about these kids committing suicide, like 3 suicides back to back, because they are in a Dozier kind of school. It's not just Louisiana, it's not just Florida, it's all over this country. And my goal is to try to get lawyers to pay attention to that and shut these places down. Thank you, Farron.
Thank you.
That's all for this week. But all of these segments are going to be available this coming week right here on this channel. And you can follow us on Twitter at America's Lawyer. I'm Mike Papantonio, and this has been America's Lawyer, where every week we tell you stories that corporate media won't tell you because their advertisers don't let them, or their political connections just don't allow for it. We'll see you next week.